Hey everybody, I'm RJ the Creator, a game developer for the past 7+ years and a 3D animator for over a decade. For the past 3.5 years, I've been building in Horizon Worlds, and one thing that really sets my work apart is lighting. The way you use light can completely transform a scene. It's the difference between something that just looks good and something that truly feels alive. In this tutorial, I'll show you how to think about and use lighting in Horizon Worlds to create mood, focus, and atmosphere. We'll break it down into three simple layers: tools, the lights and gizmos you'll use; concepts, the principles that guide them; and applications, how to bring it all together in your worlds. Let's dive in and start making your scenes shine. Before we dive into specific tools, it's important to understand how Horizon's lighting system works under the hood. Unlike engines with fully dynamic real-time lighting, Horizon relies heavily on vertex-based lighting. This means that light information is stored directly in the vertices of your models, and the density and placement of those vertices directly control how smooth or accurate shadows, gradients, and highlights appear. Because of this, the way you model isn't just about shape, it also determines how your objects react to light. Let's get into the tools. Dynamic Light Gizmo. A dynamic light gizmo is basically a runtime light source. That means it can move around, change intensity, or even be triggered in real time. What makes it so useful is that you can actually group it with an object so the light follows along. For example, in my game Sanity, I used them for glowing orbs. The light wasn't just for looks, it helped players spot the orbs in darker areas while also giving them this magical, living energy that made the whole scene feel more alive. Now, here's the thing with dynamics: they're the most powerful light source in Horizon, but they can also be pretty harsh if you drop them right up against an object's surface. The trick is to pull the light back just enough so the shadows soften, then dial in your fall off so the light isn't bleeding into areas you don't want, like underwater zones. With the right tweaks, dynamic lights can completely change the atmosphere of your scene. You also get to choose the light type. Point lights spread out in every direction, while spotlights give you that focused cone shape, almost like a flashlight or stage light. On top of that, you've got fall off distance and spread, which is basically how far the light reaches and how soft or harsh the edges are. And don't forget the simple toggle. Sometimes you'll want the light off by default and only turned on through gameplay. One thing I always remind people: watch your performance. Dynamic lights are powerful, but if you throw in too many, your world can slow down. I usually test scenes by stacking in a couple of lights and seeing how it feels before I start layering more. Less is often more, especially when you balance it with baked lighting. Let's talk about the more performance friendly way of lighting your scene: static lights. These are baked right into the world, and because they don't move or update in real time, they're a lot easier on performance compared to dynamics. Now, just because there isn't a hard limit on how many you can drop in doesn't mean you should go wild with them. Performance is always something to keep in mind. Static lights are perfect for areas that don't need to change. Things like your main ambient light, a glowing lantern on a wall, or general mood lighting that just sits there and does its job. You can shape them in different ways: cuboid, ellipsoid, disc, or rectangle. So you've got flexibility depending on what you're lighting. Then it's just about dialing in the color and intensity until it feels right. I like to think of static lights as my foundation. They give me that consistent base layer of light in a scene. Then, if I need interactivity or something that reacts to the player, I'll layer dynamic lights on top. It's all about balance: static for stability, dynamic for drama. Now let's talk about the environment gizmo. This one's kind of the backbone of your whole world because it controls the global lighting, the sky, the fog, and the overall atmosphere. Think of it as the big mood setter. It's what makes your scene feel like a bright sunny day, a moody foggy night, or even something more stylized. What's cool is that the environment gizmo doesn't just set a skybox. It also has a reflection map, a fog map, and a radiance map that directly affect how your lighting behaves. The reflections decide how shiny surfaces respond, the fog map controls how depth and distance read, and the radiance map influences the overall bounce and feel of the light. Honestly, most of the time I just cycle through the presets until I land on one that feels right for the environment I'm building. If you want to go deeper, you can actually build your own custom cube maps with custom reflections, radiance, and fog baked in. That gives you way more control, but it's a bit more advanced. I'm going to save that stuff along with baking techniques, materials for a separate advanced tutorial. The main thing to remember here is that your environment gizmo should work with your static and dynamic lights, not fight against them. Get the global mood right first, then layer in the smaller lights to really bring the scene to life. Placement and power, where you place a light, completely changes how your subject feels. Put it above, and it feels natural, like sunlight or a ceiling lamp. Place it to the side or behind, and suddenly you're showing off shape and texture. Put it below, now you've got that creepy horror vibe. And it's not just about where, it's also about power. A strong, bright light puts all the attention right on your subject. A softer, dimmer light, on the other hand, builds mood and atmosphere, almost like background music for your scene. Distance and size, the closer a light is, the more dramatic and sharp the shadows look. That's how you get those really bold contrasts. But if you want something more natural, you go bigger. A larger light source will soften everything out and give you that smooth daylight feel. A tiny light, though, creates razor sharp shadows that can feel really stylized and punchy. This is one of my favorite parts of lighting and building is colors, playing with warm and cool colors together. Warm tones, oranges, yellows, reds, instantly feel safe, cozy, or full of energy. Cool tones, blues, teals, greens, lean more toward calm, mysterious, or even eerie. The real magic happens when you layer them. Warm pulls focus. It tells the player this is the important spot. Cool sits in the background and makes the scene feel deeper and more atmospheric. That contrast makes your eye naturally snap to the warmth while still feeling the world around it. Think of this campfire, orange glow on the tents, cool moonlight filling the forest. Steel City, a warm lights from the street lights mixed with the cool neon color lights. Even a dramatic character shot works wonders with a warm light in front and a cool rim light separating them from the background. Here's the key. In Horizon, static lights don't move, so mixing warm and cool is one of the strongest tricks to guide mood and focus in baked lighting. Shape. Lights also have shapes, and that changes how reflections and highlights behave. A rectangular light feels like a window casting its glow. A round light gives you that nice, natural fall off like the sun or a lamp. Contrast is basically the drama dial. High contrast, deep shadows against bright lights feels intense and cinematic. Low contrast is calmer and more harmonious. Think about what vibe your world needs and use contrast to point the player's eye exactly where you want. Always ask yourself, why is this light here? Sometimes it's unmotivated. You're just putting it there for the look. Other times it's motivated by a source, sunlight pouring through a window, a street light just out of frame. And then there's practical lighting, where the light itself is part of the world. A lamp, a neon sign, a torch. That little bit of storytelling makes a big difference in immersion. There are a few classic setups I fall back on all the time. 3-point lighting, a key, a fill, and a rim light, is a simple way to make anything look solid and well defined. High key setups are bright and cheerful, perfect for lively areas. Low key setups are dim and dramatic, full of tension, and split lighting, where half the subject is in shadow, always adds mystery and unease. Don't worry about memorizing names. Focus on the emotion you want to create. Use the tools and concepts as a guide, but experiment and break the rules. For me, lighting is the most fun part. It's how I take a lifeless build and bring it alive with color and atmosphere.